music cuts through every boundary, and it doesn't matter what it is, language, creed, religion, every kind of possible boundary that there is.
Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Dr. Shafer of Talks with Dr. Shafer. I'm a physician, mom, life coach, musician, author, publisher, and I am passionate about helping people through storytelling to reclaim their story and build their most beautiful future. And today, I'm so excited to share with you the story of our special guest, Rick DellaRatta. Rick is an internationally acclaimed jazz artist and musician. He's an author, philanthropist, and he's the founder of Jazz for Peace. And I'm so excited to have him share his story of his music and also share some music with us today, as well as his purpose for peace and how he's trying to spread that and make a more peaceful world for everyone. Rick, thank you for joining us on the show today.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Shafer. Delighted to be here.
Oh, it's such a pleasure to have you. I've been so looking forward to this conversation. And also, I dressed for the occasion because I understand you are going to be gifting us mid-show a performance of your music.
I am so honored because now I feel like I'm really playing to, a real audience member. I mean, you really look exactly the way they do sometimes, when you play those big halls and you see the people coming in their best stuff. So you've inspired me already. One
Oh, well,
minute in, where I'm already inspired.
That's perfect. And we're going to keep it rolling and we're going to bring
Good.
our listeners along because maybe they're not watching our YouTube and not seeing it. But don't worry because the audio that you're going to hear, especially mid-show, is going to be so inspiring. And then the story, too, of how you are really trying to work for a more peaceful world and really creating that as well every step along the way. So, Rick, share with us, where did this start? What led you into a career in music?
I never really thought of anything else. The only other things I thought maybe I would like to be, there was a friend of our family, and his son was older than me. And so I asked him what he was, and he said, because he was old enough to be a grown up, kind of. And he said he was a ski bum. So I thought, oh, a ski bum. I might want to be that. That's the only other thing I ever thought of that I wanted to be. And then I kind of got to the point where I was like, man, I'll just be lucky to make it as a musician, let alone a ski bum too. But I did eventually I'm actually the founder, to believe it or not, now of Ski Bums for Peace. If you go to
No.
skibumsforpeace.com. Yeah, because
Oh,
I did bring skiing into I started playing at ski areas. I kept the skiing going all the way through. And then I do
yeah.
spend a lot of time in the Wasatch Mountains of Utah. I have a lot of great friends out there and all that stuff. But I mean, as a profession,
Yeah.
I've never, but that was so to give you an idea, I guess you would say there really wasn't any other option that I ever thought of. I
Mm.
heard music. I saw that these people were bringing a lot of joy to people, and didn't matter all people were affected by it. I saw the universality of it. And then a piano came into my house on Christmas Day. So I thought, being that Santa Claus had, gone through all that trouble, I should probably figure out what this is. And just one thing led to another all the way through until the day of Jazz for Peace, when I wrote a poem. And then another thing led to then a whole nother trajectory, kind of an offshoot, took
Yeah.
over.
Yeah. Well, those pivots, that's where the gold is. That's where the magic of the story really lies.
Yeah, well, it's very strange because when I had this poem at the end of the day, I thought to myself, this is too surreal. Here I am with something profound from such an event, and I don't know what's going to happen, but I did think, there could be something more powerful than me involved here. I had to believe that,
Mm.
because it was just not something I could have planned on my own or come up with on my own, or you know, it's one
Mm.
of those things like they say, they kind of say that it's unbelievable, or could you believe it? You wouldn't believe it if we told you. I guess there's
Mm.
an expression for it, right? Yeah, like
Yeah,
you wouldn't believe it if you tried to do it. So
exactly. And I found that that experience for myself with songwriting,
wow.
that the best songs, the songs that really resonated the most with me and with listeners when I was really dedicating my life to this as a teenager, was when I was in the music industry. The best ones were the ones that you sat down and it was like you didn't write it.
Right.
It just came out of you.
That's true. That's a good point. There's a lot of people that they would interview about this song. Oh, where'd you the and the songwriter would just say, "Oh, that one just, it just,
Yeah.
came out. I woke up with it, something like that." So there is something
Mm.
about that. And I think, music and jazz and improvisation, I was always drawn to that because that kind of comes through you and comes out of you. So I think there's like two things going on. One is you're working and honing your craft and putting everything together and getting all of these things. And then there's the actuality. When you put it into actuality, it either comes out of you or it comes through you. So it just
Mm.
happens at that point. So I guess, they're two separate things. And one of them kind of creates the channel for the other one to,
Yeah.
metamorphosize itself.
What a beautiful thing also for musicians to understand, especially maybe young musicians that are just starting out in writing music and maybe they feel a little bit of writer's block, musical writer's block.
Right.
Just keep trying. Or if you're writing a book, just keep trying, because when you create that action, there's a momentum you're creating. And like you said, that practice of writing music, that practice of writing will create more music, will create more writing. So what is really your process for writing music?
Well, what I do is I work on certain types of techniques. It's almost a meditational thing.
Mm.
The piano is almost a Ouija board in some ways, the fingers just move because there's so many things that I've embraced along the way, from classical music to pop music to rock music
Mm.
to all types of jazz improvisational techniques. And there might be something that I'm just working on. And what I do is I kind of just, um, it's almost like a Tai Chi type of thing. Do
Mm.
things really super slow as if you were practicing Tai Chi. And
Mm.
then at the point where something's supposed to happen, I kind of just allow it or let it come through. And then
Mm.
sometimes I do have to, I would say, trust the universe. There are many times when I'm like, wow, this looks like this is looking like it's going to be the next thing that I need to tackle. How the heck am I going to do that? It looks like Mount
Mm.
Everest. But then I just figure I will just, it's there and I'm going to get there. And I'm just going to trust the fact that I'm going to get to the finish line somehow or other, and just trust it,
Mm.
and walk. I mean, it's almost like walking up a mountain too. You've got to trust that you're going to, you know, persevere and somehow make
Mm.
it.
That is so beautiful. I love how you describe that process. And it makes me think, when I think about, the work that we do in life coaching and the work that we think about the brain and the psychology and the neurology behind it all. And it's, to me, when you were talking about basically giving into the universe, trusting the universe, the words that came up in my mind was that you are the universe, right? That it's within you,
Hmm.
and you are kind of removing the roadblocks between your energy and the energy around you and letting it flow. Because I think so many of us are so focused on the constraints of our body and are maybe focused on limitations, right? Like, oh man, last time I played that, I really had, maybe there's a difficulty with this. I had a writer's block with this, and we get stuck there instead
Right.
of just getting rid of that and saying, I trust the force within me and I trust the force around me, and let's see what happens. And that's really, one, how you make beautiful music, but also how you make daring choices to take your music and then say, I'm going to make a not for profit. I'm going to make an organization that's going to not only spread music, but spread a message of peace.
And what we really want to spread is the fact that every single person within them has something unique and special to offer to this planet. And there's just no doubt about it. I mean, why would they be here if they didn't? Look at how unique every tree is. There's no tree that's alike. Our fundraising model is called an empowerment tree. And when we're finished
Mm.
with it, it's a cookie cutter thing. But after we do it, the result is completely unique for each organization, just like a tree outside. I mean, you look out and everything is unique and special, and each one of us, I think, really have something that nobody else can do but them. And then there's always something that people will say, darn it, if I don't do that, no one's going to do it. And I think
Mm.
everybody has that within them. I know for me with Jazz for Peace, I would have loved for somebody else to go carry that weight, but got to
Mm.
the point where it's like, no one's going to do it if I don't do it. So I just better get going here.
Mm. I love it. So you had that thought of, wow, I'm tackling a real mountain. I mean, this is a big thing that I want to do. And I'd love if I didn't have to do this, but I feel a calling to do it. So how did you face that fear and how did you start this process? Because I imagine there are people out there listening thinking, I've got a big dream. I've got a big goal for how I want to help people, but how do I get started on it?
Yeah, I think basically, you 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 it looks like wouldn't it be better if somebody else did it kind of thing because it's so overwhelming. But once you realize that you're going to just march forward and it's not going to get done unless you do it, then you just have to again allow things to play out. Like you've got a poem. What are you going to do with this poem? Well, you must, the poem's there. You have it. I don't know how I got it because I'm not Edgar Allan Poe, but I'm sitting here with a poem. Well, the next thing that came up was to recite the poem. Well, it just happened that I had an event with 8,500 people that are going to be there, and I was the headliner, so I was able to recite it to a giant audience. Where many
Mm.
great poets would have been jealous of me probably, but I had that opportunity, and then I had the opportunity to put it to music for another prestigious event, and onward and upward. And now I'm in a position where I've talked on other podcasts about helping outstanding causes, and one of them I helped. One of the ones I tell a story about was an outstanding causes that was addressing bullying in the schools. And I
Mm.
was, here I was thinking today because news was coming out about this young kid that he had been bullied at school, and I mean, I just wish that people would listen to that and hear the importance to actually bring the artist into these schools, bring the musician into
Mm.
these schools, bring the people that want to address bullying, into your town so that these kids realize they're not alone. And that was the
Mm.
result of a event I did out in Los Angeles to address bullying in the schools. And the woman wrote to me and told me how transformative it was. So, these are just I feel really blessed to be in the opportunity to say, hey, if you want to address these issues, we do have a track record which you can look at, precedent and things that show that we have made a difference, and maybe we can do the same for you.
That is so beautiful, impactful, and important. And I love the honesty and vulnerability of saying, at the beginning, this I recognized how heavy it was. And I paused for half a second, but not enough to change my momentum. And I moved forward with it. And now I see the gifts of that. And people are affected by the gifts of that. And that's so incredibly important for people to understand that these life-changing decisions that really, when we look back, you
Mhm.
know, 20, 30 years later, and I know you're 25 years into
Right.
your Jazz for Peace
Hmm.
project as the founder. You're 25 years into this project, into this goal to use jazz to spread peace. And now when you look back, do you just want to give yourself a hug and just be like, thank you so much for doing this? Like, look where I've come. Look at the experiences I've had because of this, the people I've met.
Well, I think, it's been so rewarding because now we're hearing, you yourself were in music at one time. Now we're hearing stories first from the movie industry and now from the music industry about how, tragic and traumatic that has been for so many people that entered those industries and, got exploited and all of those kinds of things. And so, I'm hoping I've opened a door for a whole nother outlet for people where maybe
Mm.
they can come in and instead of being looked at, as prey or a target or,
Mm.
you know, um,
Yeah.
in that exploitation, instead they are looked at as, hey, this person has so much to help us with this, so much, this person can make a difference in other
Mm.
people's lives because everybody, everyone could use the kind of help that I think artists like yourself are doing now. And some of these artists, they really can make a difference. It's not just me, it's so many of them. And let's get them all making a difference. I would be delighted.
Oh, absolutely. Art is so incredibly important. And because I know you do work in schools to spread your mission and to take part of these fundraising activities and these organizations, unfortunately, we have less and less funding for arts programs in schools, and that is not going to have a good effect on our kids. They need sports, they need academics, they desperately need art programs. They need music, they need to be able to paint, they need to be able to sculpt, work with wood. They need to be able to work with their hands and their minds in a different way, because not everybody fits into, the sports mold. Not everybody fits into the academic mold. And if we don't really show children who have this affiliation with music, they really feel at home with music. If we don't give them a home when they're young, they can go through life feeling like they don't belong anywhere, when really, I mean, music is such a wonderful place to belong in when it's a safe space. And as you said, yes, many of us who were very young in the music industry have stories to tell, and we find those safe spaces to tell them. And we work to change that for future artists and for artists now still in the industry. But it's just so important to expose people to music and to just focus on not so much the industry part of it, but just the artistry part.
Well, music has, and especially the art form of jazz, it has a historical precedent to have the ability to affect people in profoundly positive ways.
Mm.
And, a perfect example is what we've been talking about. What if instead of this person had been bullied, some musician had come out there and addressed that situation and maybe put all these kids in a situation where they thought twice about it and created a safety for that. And then what if one of those kids, even that one, was profoundly positive affected by that presentation, by that musical performance, and went on to become, one of our great Americans. I mean, there's numerous, we chose this guy named Roy Black, I think his name was, who had achieved so much in his life coming from a Midwest, small little town in the Midwest, that people asked him towards the end, how come you achieved so many things, and the average person from your school was just became the ordinary person or whatever, and he just said jazz. And they said, how could that be? And he
Mm.
said he was profoundly impacted by a performance that he saw in his town when he was a kid. And they looked that up, and it happened to be Louis Armstrong that was playing the trumpet at just some kind of thing, but he focused on that person and concluded that that person was a genius. And
Mm.
from that conclusion, it altered his perception of everything. Now he wanted to know how come a genius couldn't vote. And he ended up,
Mm.
changing his life. And he's actually the author of many great documents that are in the hall of whatever it is down there in Washington, D.C. One of them is
Wow.
Brown versus the Board of Education. He was the author of
Mm.
the whole thing. So, it's it could make a profoundly positive difference in a child's life. And here's the crazy thing. It's really easy to do because Jazz for Peace provides a way for people who have the will. And what's happened just in the last couple of days that I've discovered that's amazing is there's an entrepreneurial kind of a portal, and they contact us entrepreneurs and they ask us to answer questions in 100 words so that anybody can see it. It's only 100 words. You could have the shortest attention span, whatever, and you're going to get it. And it's called enterprisezone.cc. So it's enterprisezone.cc instead of
Mm.
.this .cc. And at that website, you could just go in the search bar, type Rick DellaRatta, and you get these. I was looking at them, in all honesty, you could figure out how to bring Jazz for Peace or myself to anywhere just from those little 100-word things, and then just
Mm.
contact us after reading that, and you'd be on your way.
I love it. Thank you for sharing that. And I love that. And I love the concept of using music and jazz especially as a perspective
Hmm.
starter, right? Giving new perspectives by having maybe individuals that you wouldn't have otherwise seen in your small town, right? Meeting new people, seeing what they're doing, and just the musicality of it and the lyrics of music. As you were talking about, the bully, I'm thinking about, okay, so if someone is in the position of being a bully, there's some pretty good evidence to suggest that they've also been bullied. They learned that behavior.
Right.
And so they're taking out that energy on someone that, they think they can because they've got all this pent up stuff, right? And that's not an excuse, but we know that happens for young children. But if they get this gift of perspective from a song that allows them to really hone in emotionally, because songs really just tie into our emotions. They really touch us so deeply, and say, ooh, okay, I know what it feels like to be bullied, right? Maybe I'm willing to accept that dad bullies me, right? This little boy, and maybe dad's bullying him at home, and he couldn't accept that before because kids don't want to think like that, right? They kind of
Sure.
cover it up. And now
Absolutely.
I heard this song, and he thinks like, okay, I recognize what it means to be bullied now. I'm kind of tapping into this emotional space. And now I recognize, on a human level, that my friend Dylan, I don't want to do that to him. He doesn't deserve that. And I don't deserve it either. And it's such a great conversation starter for things that otherwise could stay hidden for such a long time. So that's such a beautiful example.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I've never met anyone who did something, that they were did something that was that was not looked on as a good activity, that they were proud of. When they grow up, they're like, geez, I wish someone had stepped in, and I wish I didn't do
Yeah.
that. I didn't want to do that, or I didn't know better. A lot of times kids don't know better, and they really just need someone to do them a favor and help them, get off of that tangent and onto something productive and positive.
Mm. Rick, would you do us the beautiful favor of, I'm going to say that again, I'm going to cut it out because I tripped over my words. Rick, will you do us the beautiful favor of playing us one of your songs?
Sure, sure. I'd love to. So what I do a lot is I improvise. I make up something just for you. So that'll never be heard on any other podcast for you. And I'll try to come up with something familiar to lead us into it. So hope to, lead you into from familiar to the unfamiliar. So this is a song from Brazil, and it's called The Waters of March. And I'm going to do a little arrangement of that. And then I'm going to lead into something that I'm just going to make up just for this podcast, especially, as appropriate as you look. I can't help but be excited to play something special for you. Let's see how it comes out.
Thank you.
A stick, a stone, it's the end of the road. It's the rest of a stump. It's a little alone. It's a sliver of glass. It is life, it's the sun. It is night, it is death. It's a trap, it's a gun. The oak when it blooms, the fox in the brush, the night in the wood, a song of a thrush, the wood of the wind, fall, a scratch, a lump. It is nothing at all, it's the wind blowing free. It's the end of the slope. It's a beam, it's a void, it's a hunch, it's a hope. And the riverbank talks of the waters of March. It's the end of the strain, it's the joy in your heart.
Oh, that was absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much, Rick. Oh my goodness. The riff, the melody coming back at the end. Oh, that was such a wonderful treat. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I hope it was worth the the attendance or whatever. You're
Oh
definitely
my.
going to get front row.
I love it. It was definitely worth the ticket. Absolutely. It was beautiful. Oh my goodness. Wow, what a treat. Oh, okay, everybody. I feel like, that was especially at the end, the way that it was growing and swelling. Now we all just need to take a deep breath and be like, okay, what we need to do a temperature check, right? Like how's the room feeling? Is everybody feeling this kind of feeling of a combination of peace and hope?
I would just love to someday show up there in northern Michigan and see you in that dress again, but right at her live performance, from the stage.
Yes.
Be a blast.
Oh, that would be great. And we do go to New York. So I am going to tell you when we're there. I love, going to Birdland and
Yeah.
checking them out. Oh my goodness. Yeah, absolutely. It's such a treat because, I like you, I'm just so passionate about music, and in our family, we are also very, very passionate about human rights and philanthropy. And so there's just, so much kindredness there. And wow, just to be able to share your soul. When people play music, I think you just get to see a piece of their soul. It's such a vulnerable moment.
Well, I have to tell you that, the Jazz for Peace CD, the one called Jazz for Peace, was recorded all live, and half of it was recorded at the first Jazz for Peace concert, which was in upstate New York. And there's actually a version of this song that I just played, but totally different than what I did for you. But there's a version of Waters of March on but the other half of the CD was recorded at Birdland here in New York City
Well,
at a
there
live
you go.
performance. Yeah.
One of my favorite places. It's amazing. And oh, well, if you are there, please send me a message because I want to be in attendance. And for our listeners, now you know where you can purchase that song so that you can enjoy it again. And not just, I'd love for you to listen to this episode over and over again. That's great. But I'd love even more for you to buy Rick's CD and be able to support both Jazz for Peace and his work, because it's wonderful. Now, Rick, you not only are the founder of Jazz for Peace and an incredible musician and performer, but you're also an author. Tell us about your book.
Well, basically, what happened was a bunch of things kind of came together. One was that one of my ski friends actually was telling me, he said, you should really write a book. And I was like, oh my God, a book? You gotta be kidding me. You got to do this and that. It takes a lot of work. He said, no. There's this chat GPT that can gather information, and give you the information, and then you could maybe edit it, blah, blah, blah. I said, you know what? Let me check with a volunteer we had. So we had a volunteer. We've had hundreds of volunteers at Jazz for Peace, and that's been a big plus, a bonus for us. They're just such wonderful people, and they've made such great contributions. But there was one that had written an article about Jazz for Peace, and it got published on a portal called All About Jazz, which is a relatively well-known portal in the jazz world. All About Jazz. So, there's tons of stuff on there, and some of them get a couple hundred views or whatever. Maybe a really good one would get 800 views or whatever. Her article on Jazz for Peace got 12,000 views. An
Oh,
article she
wow.
wrote about Jazz for Peace. So I approached her because what I do is I try to look at what a person's passion is, what they might be interested in. And if I can, connect with that, then it's going to be a fun, it'll be a fun journey rather than telling the volunteer what we need and trying to fit a square peg into a round hole.
Yeah.
But I just said, you remember you did that? She said, yeah. I said, you got 12,000. She said, I know, you're right. I said, well, listen, this guy was blah, blah, blah. So I kind of gave her the bug. And then she decided to write this book. It's called Paving the Path for Peace Through Music. Her name is Deborah R. Saratelli. And so she's really the author. I did write the foreword. And if you go to Amazon, you can read the foreword for free. And the foreword is really something I'm very proud of, because I tried to tell the difference between a trained musician, and I used Mozart for the example, and the musician who just gets an instrument and connects with the universe through the music and the sound and teaches himself, or maybe just becomes and I showed the value and I showed what it's the difference between both. I mean, really, I talked about Mozart in ways that people don't realize, that, studying music through the tutelage of his father was actually blocking him from the other person's advancement, who was just getting things so creatively and so organically, you know what I mean? So I was trying to describe that. And then I was showing how, the advancements, though, from the tutelage were phenomenal for Mozart. And, but I also showed how once he grew out of that, he faced a lot of difficulties and challenges, because now he was too good for, the average Joe, or certainly for the average Archbishop of Ferdinand of whatever. And so, he had troubles because his music was gonna, it was futuristic, it was beyond, it was great, it was gonna help people for generations. So, but I end the foreword by saying, listen, both of these people, and I wish I had the wording for you. I could tell you the wording, but this is important what I say here. I just say, basically, both of these existences are honorable. Both made great contributions to others, as well as their community, society, and are great examples for the world at large. Both of their lives and efforts are a much greater alternative choice than the path of war, discrimination, hatred, and annihilation. The fact of the matter is, when we fill our souls up with creativity, artistry, and intelligence, and numerous other things of that nature, we have a better chance at avoiding the behavior that leads to destruction. And this is a story of my life through music, which inevitably became the story of Jazz for Peace. So it's hard to read, so it's kind of touching. But just so you know, that last quote is actually a famous quote. If you type in Rick DellaRatta famous quote into Google, you'll get that last line, which again, I didn't sit there for 3,000, it's just something I said off the top of my head in an interview. So back to your point where it just came out. Those words just came out in an interview and got lifted by all these famous quotes websites. I had nothing to do with it.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, I think that's the thing. When you have a passion and you're willing to put yourself in spaces, in front of faces, in front of ears, in front of listeners, and you're willing to just speak your heart, I mean, that is more than most of us will necessarily be brave to do. So even just that small act of bravery can then affect so many people and influence them coming on podcasts and even starting your own podcast, right? Which you've done recently. Tell me about your podcast and how people can listen to that.
Well, so yeah, it's amazing. See, that's the cool thing, is that honestly, when I try to do something, I end up with disappointment, because it's very hard to fit exactly what you want into the world. But if you're well intended and you just put your best foot out there, you might end up with something even better than what you set out for. And you'll definitely end up with something that you wouldn't want to trade for anything in the world. Even with the heartbreak, even with the disappointment, I find myself, hey, wait a minute. I wouldn't want to trade this. I would take this or that in addition, but I wouldn't trade my journey or whatever. So again, so after being on, I don't know, I think it was over 200 podcasts as a guest. And again, that's because people are suddenly now waking up to the journey and the mission. They want to hear the story of Jazz for Peace. There's a big lag between where you started out and now where people are catching up. And I hope it doesn't take them 25 years up to catch up to my ideas now, because who the hell knows if I'll live to, how old I'll be at that point. But the podcast started with me I thought, let me take a couple of podcasts that I just love and see if these people would like to be. And so I said to some podcast that I was on, I said, you have a wonderful program, blah, blah, we should do. And they're like, yeah, well, I'd love to get. I said, well, I don't know who's going to listen, but you wouldn't mind if somebody from Nigeria heard your podcast. I don't know if you'll ever find out who they are, because, Jazz for Peace just has been to so many places. I mean,
Right.
There's Pakistan, southern India. I mean, you name it. We've been to places that no one's ever been. And so you never know who's going to listen to their podcast. So they were like, yeah. So I started out that way. And then I got to the point well, this thing is kind of, it looks like it's got a little legs. I better just take the plunge and interview a few people. And so, yeah, it's some very interesting. But again, I was referring to the podcast when I told you the bullying story, because I actually said it on one of our Jazz for Peace podcasts. I'd said it on other ones, but I couldn't remember which one. But I remembered today that I had said it on a Jazz for Peace podcast. And I thought to myself, I hope someone will take into consideration that this could be avoided.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's wonderful to focus on your gifts, but it's also so wonderful to explore them and to allow them to evolve, right? They don't have to be singular. We can grow and, trim back. We can grow in one direction and decide, okay, I'm going to trim that off. That's really not serving me. I'm losing energy here.
Right.
I only have so much time and energy. I'm going to trim that off. I'm going to say, take peace with it, put it in a vase somewhere. That was a beautiful moment. Take a picture of it, but I don't need that anymore. And now I can go in this direction. And that's when you really grow and develop things. And so it's okay to decide, that you're not going to write a full, like a book, right? But gosh, I love podcasting because I can play my music on the podcast. I can talk to other people and spread our message and reach their audiences. And I just love this kind of creative, it almost seems like a creative urgency that you have with a mission, right? You want to create music, but you also are staying so true to your overall mission. Could you describe a little more in detail for listeners about Jazz for Peace? Like, what does that look like when you go to Pakistan, when you go to Nigeria? How are you reaching people in those settings?
It's really unique and special experiences. I mean, it's amazing. You could literally do an entire podcast about, let's say, our first trip to Africa, which was Rwanda, when we were helping get that country out of, basically the dark ages caused by a genocide that had taken place, that had just left the country paralyzed, because really nobody wanted anything to do. Nobody really wanted to set foot in the country, knowing what had taken place and knowing that 1 million people had been massacred and all that. And it took them many, many years. But amazingly, when they decided to, showcase their country to the world, they contacted Jazz for Peace. So it was just, and so again, it's so many of these, I mean, you mentioned Pakistan. So that was a situation where unbeknownst to me, 90% of the people are illiterate. And so there's all these illiterate children. And we were helping an organization that is so overwhelmed that they actually teach mothers how to read. So they teach reading to mothers, and mothers teach reading to children to try to, alleviate this problem. And I mean, the things that I have learned and the things that I know are extraordinary. And, I realized I could make a difference. This knowledge could help people. Well, the first time I realized it was shortly before 9/11, maybe a few years before that, when I had told people that, I don't know if you guys know this, but like earlier today, I was playing in someone's house with an Israeli musician and a Palestinian musician. And people were so shocked and surprised. And I said, well, I don't know what to tell you. I would never think there was any problem. I would never think there was a war. There was never even the remotest issue that there was any conflict. You'd never know that the two countries have a conflict if you had been at this gathering, at this, this thing, this jam session or whatever. So, and so these kinds of things, they're just opportunity. I mean, there are more opportunities for me to help others from going to. But the other interesting thing is you also get a unique energy from all of these people and all of these
Mm.
cultures, So very interesting things. Like I'll be walking with I remember I was walking with a person in Chinatown, and we were walking down the street, and I said, we're going to walk past some people up there, and they're from Africa. And the woman said, how do you know they're from? I said, I can feel it. I just have been to Africa so many. I know they're from Africa. And I think they're from Western Africa or something like that. So, I mean, I was like, even the part of Africa. And they're like, no way. This is impossible. You're not going to know that. I said, I'm just telling you. I don't know what to tell you. So we get closer and closer as we're walking. And as we're walking, they're feeling my energy. Because they're feeling I'm not one of these other people that's completely oblivious to them. You know what I mean? And when as I get close to these people, we just stop and look at each other, because it's like, I know that you know that you know that I know, and I'm talking to them and I'm telling them that I've been to their country and blah, blah, blah. You know what I'm saying? So in other words, it affects you, it enriches you, but it also makes you want to enrich others and pass forward.
That's beautiful. Travel, music, literature, conversation, connection. I mean, those are just gifts from the universe to us to help us understand why we're here and the joy that we can experience here. Life is an experience, and that's one thing that's so beautiful about music is it's a great way to explain to someone how you can shift your experience of the same moment momentarily, right? So if they haven't quite grasped mindset work, because we know that's what you're doing, right? When you're working with someone and they're having a crisis because of bullying, you're trying to help them with their mindset work. But that language they may not have, that example they may not have. But music can, even in a note, set a tone, set a mood, take you to a certain place in your brain, in your memories, and set you in the right environment for learning about that. And with the right lyrics and tones, can, in a really short period of time, do so much more explaining and connecting than a conversation potentially could, right? Because we just connect with music in a different way.
Well, I just wish that so many people who don't know what just said can hear what you just said, because you said it perfectly. Basically, um, music cuts through every boundary, and it doesn't matter what it is: language, creed, religion, every kind of possible boundary that there is. And not only that, but you're right, it creates a timeout where now you're getting positive messages that are stimulating your intellect and affecting you in a positive way. And they're giving you the opportunity to reassess. It's the same reassessment that you make when you were asking me about how I practice. I'll be doing something, but it's the reassessment, so I'll do something, and it'll when my brain fills up with data, I relax it. I stop. You give it a break. And then you go back to it, but now you're going back with this data in your head and in a fresh perspective. And that's what, music does in its real form, because I think what we are doing, and people don't realize that sometimes, we're doing something that looks great for the ism that we're in, which is capitalism, but they don't realize what we're taking out of it. We're taking out of the pie to shape it. And music is great for pure entertainment. Music is great for, selling a product. Music is great for background music. But if you go into generation, if you look back in history, indigenous people whom I've met all over the world now, they didn't put those limits on it, and neither did Mozart. So we're taking, we're putting back in what we were removing for profiteering ideas. And so hopefully we, with Jazz for Peace, you're getting something that's going to do those things. It's going to stimulate your intellect, give you a fresh perspective, give you something thought-provoking, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh, well, you have definitely done that today on the show. And please, can you tell listeners, remind them again about the name of the podcast, as well as your website, where they can go to interact with you and follow along and learn more about Jazz for Peace and how they can help with your mission?
Well, the podcast, it's called the Jazz for Peace podcast, and it's on Spotify. And we have extraordinary guests. I mean, we had one on recently that just comes to mind. It was for our 4th of July. This person had been a refugee camp in Chile on September 11th, 1973. So September 11th, but in 1973, there was an overthrow. And this was a CIA kind of a thing. So you would think that he had an issue with it with the United States. It turned out he ended up traveling all over the world and living in the United States and writing a book, 10 Great Things to Love About America, which was for our 4th of July thing. And when I said, how is it that you overcame, being in a refugee camp and all these issues? And he said, because he looks at the writings of America. So even if we don't always do them, they're written. The things in our Constitution, they're written, and we take them for granted. And here was this guy telling people from his perspective, from the perspective of someone was not born in America. And I just thought that was so special to realize that these words are there, they're in, we have them. Some countries don't even have those words. We just have to insist that they're implemented and followed and all that stuff. But anyway, that's just one example. We also hint have outstanding podcasters on our show, so keep your eyes open for things like that. And what was the other one? You said podcast, and what did you say? What was the other things you want me to say?
Your website, and where people can, learn.
Website is jazzforpeace.org, but if you want to just find out about me, it would be rickdellaratta.com. And then, of course, anywhere on the internet, for whatever reason, we're all over the place. I hope they're seeing good things on there. Like I said, Rick DellaRatta famous quote is one way to start, or even that one I gave you, the entrepreneur. I think, what was it? enterprisezone.cc. One of many areas where you can go and find information. But like I said, there are these places like that where you can just read little 100-word things and get incredible knowledge. But you can always send us an email at info@jazzforpeace.org. And that just generic email address, you can send an email just saying whatever you think. And whatever you think, believe it or not, is a seedling of which we possibly could grow an empowerment tree, which is the funding model that we use.
I love that. And I remember seeing that online, saying that, the comment, that the
right,
possible, the strength and the connectivity of just one single comment.
Yeah.
And that's important to remember, the strength that we have, how we choose to use our words and our talents. And you are choosing to use your talents in such a beautiful and peaceful way. And I'm so grateful that you were on the show today. Thank you so much. And I'm just so blessed that you're able to come and share not only your story and what you are doing with your work, but also play us a song. That was incredible.
Oh, so glad, so happy that it all worked out so great. And thank you as well, Dr. Shafer. I had a wonderful time.
Thank you so much. And thank you to our listeners. Please feel free to leave us comments as well. We always love to hear from you. And you can also go to the website, www.drshaferstigenova.com. If you have any comments or questions or need coaching or anything else, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for being here. Stay safe and take care. I'll talk to you soon.